Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, as we gather, please remind us that this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Help us to always treat others the way we want to be treated. In your name we pray, amen. And the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. We're fortunate to have a Cathedral graduate's parents with us tonight, who has celebrated her efforts to draw attention to destructive decisions that can lead to tragedy. Please welcome Susan Becker to Cathedral Graduate.
Movements, you see how he connects with others, so you can get to know him a little bit before I actually begin to talk about him and share his story. So I hope you enjoy it.
Usually I'm like a one cheeseburger a week kind of guy. I haven't had a cheeseburger in a month. I love cheeseburgers.
creating this opportunity for me to come here and share with you my son, Henry Becker, and his story. The other night, as I was beginning to think about, what can I say to juniors and seniors at Cathedral, or any junior and senior, how can I impact their life? How can I not talk at them and talk to them? And that became very important to me, because I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk to you and with you. So it was the night of the supermoon. And so I took the time just to step outside, and it all made sense that I would step outside. Emory was known for taking photography using just the light of the moon. I probably spent at least an hour out there just looking around and just sitting there just at peace, looking at the moon and knowing that Emory was right there with me. And then it just really made sense why I came outside. It was very evident to me that Emory walked me outside. Cathedral High School is where it all started for Emory and his twin sister. And now I would say it's starting here for me as well. I've been wanting to get into a school for the last 3 years, but it was really important to me that I came to Cathedral High School first, because this is where it started for Emory. Emory and Claire graduated from Cathedral in 2010. When he was a freshman, I suggested to him, hey, why don't you get involved in the theater department? He would have nothing to do with that, nothing. Because he was so stubborn, he said, no, I'm not going to do it unless I can take a theater technology class. Well, at that time, he shared with me that an only upperclassmen get to do that. So, his senior year, fortunately for him and for all of us, he did take theater tech. And that was just the beginning. I like to think of it as it was the launching pad for what was to be at Indiana State. Indiana State is where he launched the rocket, and he never stopped until a young lady made the choice to get in a car and drive drunk. You could say, you might even say that he still hasn't stopped. Aaron graduated from Indiana State and moved to LA to pursue his career and live his dream. He was a multimedia server technician and LED specialist, one of the best in his industry at the young age of 23. He purchased a camera and became well known as an indie rock music photographer. Emory was killed the early morning hours of March 18, 2018. He was 25 years young. He was on his way home after shooting an indie rock band and was struck and hit by a hit and run. And he actually survived that. He was getting up, he had been knocked over on his motorcycle. According to the witnesses, he was getting up, he was lifting his motorcycle up, and he got hit the second time by a drunk driver. Emory was killed and pronounced dead on the scene. That morning, early morning of March 18th, I received a phone call at 8:50 in the morning on Sunday. Typically, I never answer the phone with a number that I don't know. However, it said LA. I knew it was 5:50 a.m. in LA, and I thought, better answer that. And when I answered it, this person said, she told me who she was. I did remember that she did acknowledge she was with the LA Police Department. But in my head, I thought, oh, you've got to be kidding. I cannot believe he's gotten himself in some sort of trouble. However, she began to ask me questions. She wanted to know, are you Susan Becker? I said, yes. She wanted to know, do you know Emory Wyatt Becker? Yes, he's my son. She wanted to know if I was alone. I said, no, my husband's here. I knew the next question that was coming. she wanted to know if I was setting down. And at that moment, I knew what she was going to say. Emery's been in an accident, and he didn't survive. From that moment on, just when my head was spinning, I was screaming. You know, I have no idea what it must have been like for my husband to hear that. All I knew was that we needed help. So I made one phone call to a really good friend of mine. Very bluntly told her, Emery's dead, I need help. And then I had to make that call to my daughter, his twin sister. I asked my daughter if her boyfriend was there and if I could talk to him. I didn't want to tell him what happened. I just wanted to prepare him for what I was going to have to tell her. And I wanted him to know that I was going to have to tell her something that would devastate her. And I wanted him prepared. However, in the background, I could hear my daughter. I could hear Clara. And she is saying over and over, he's gone, isn't he? He's gone. And she's very agitated. To the point where I did finally have to tell her boyfriend that yes, Emery's gone. I found out later that she had a dream, a nightmare, and had sat straight up in bed. We have no doubt at the time when that happened, that when that dream happened, that it was when he actually died. It wasn't until later that night that we found out that Emery was killed by a drunk driver. My niece had reached out to us and she said, you know, Aunt Susan, there are reporters trying to find family members of Emery Becker. And I couldn't understand why would reporters want to talk to a family member when there was an accident? And so it was at that time, it was probably 6:30 in the evening by then. And I looked at his social media, and there had been a video posted on his social media of a news reporter, from a news reporter. And it said, well-known music photographer killed by a drunk driver. It was not an accident. An individual chose to get in a car and to drive it drunk and killed our son. That's not an accident. That's a choice. I think it's important too that you know that our family, my side of the family, has been impacted 2 other times by a drunk driver. Emery's namesake, his great-grandfather, was actually killed by a drunk driver, as well as one of his daughters, who was also a twin, and she was 10 years old. So when we found out that it was a drunk driver, while it was already tragic that there had been an accident and Emery didn't survive, but it just multiplied the tragedy because it was something that could have been preventable. So it's been said by some of his professors at Indiana State that Emery was a bright, shining shooting star that was snuffed out too early. And we became very, very quickly the impact that Emery had. Indiana State, within 2 weeks of his death, renamed an award in his name. It's the Emery Becker Emerging Technology Award. It's a forever award. And then we began to hear so many different stories of Emery and how he had impacted so many lives that we knew that Emery's legacy gets to continue. It just gets to continue through us, and we get to be that vessel, and that's one reason why I'm here today. So we actually worked with Indiana State to create a scholarship in his name as well. It's the Becker Theater Design and Technology Memorial Scholarship. So there's so many things. I want to check the time real quick. Okay, we're good. So there's so many things. There's like, I will share in my story, but I also like to remember all the things that I'm grateful for. So first and foremost, I am so internally grateful that I was chosen to be Emery's mother, and as well as Clara's. I am also very, very grateful that as Emery's mother, I have no regrets. I'm grateful that 18 days before he was killed, his dad, his sister Clara, and I spent 6 full days with him in Los Angeles. And that is something that we make decisions in life, and stuff. We could have said, no, we don't want to take the time, we don't want to spend the money, we don't want this, we don't want that. But oh my goodness, I am so grateful that we did that. And then I'm grateful too that 10 days before he was killed, so on March 8th, which is Women's International Day, he called me just to remind me, said some things to me to remind me of some things about myself. And I know now that he was getting ready to shoot a big Women's International event at the Weltron in LA. He was pretty excited about that. He was packing his cameras. He called me and said, Mom, it's Women's International Day. I need to talk to you. So he shared with me his experience of his mom. And that was so powerful. And I know now, looking back on it, he did that to remind me so that I would be prepared for what was going to happen. You never know what the universe is putting in place, but there are certain things that I do believe that were being put in place. Our trip there, his phone call. 3 days before he died, we talked 3 times. We never talked 3 times in one day. And one time we FaceTimed, and that never happened. Then in the video, I don't know if you noticed, like there was one part where he looks at the camera and he does this little wave. That was just maybe around 4 hours before he was killed. He had never, ever gone live on Instagram before, the only time. I am forever grateful that Emery lived without fear and that he lived his life fully. And I am grateful for all of our memories because that is something no one can take from us. And the one thing I tell our daughter and us as a family, I said, the young lady that killed Emery, she destroyed Emery's life, but she does not get the power to destroy ours. So we've chosen to continue to live life fully, just as Emery would want us to. A couple of years ago, I was given this poem. And it's a poem that Emery wrote, and I'd like to read it. It's very powerful. He says, I am not a fairy tale. I am a life. I am a soul. I have dreams, fears, loves, and doubts like any other person. I am not a fairy tale. I don't know for sure what I'm going to do. I'm not a fairy tale. My loss, my pain shape the way I see the world. I am not perfect. I will not ever be perfect. This place that we call now, the time that we call the present, presents us with multiple opportunities for not being a fairy tale. I am not a fairy tale. If given the chance, I don't even think I would want to be. With the pressures placed around us every day to do our best, to not give up, to fight through until it's through, I am on a tightrope. I am not standing. I am hanging on 3 fingers clinging, desperately trying to make an unobtainable difference. In this world controlled by money, suits, flashy haircuts, and connections, I am not a fairy tale. The second definition of a fairy tale in the dictionary is a story meant to trick people. I am not that fairy tale. I try to show people my true self. I try to show that I'm not here to lie my way through life I choose not to live that way. I see the wide road in front of me, but I do not know how fast, how far, or even in what direction I should go. I see the sun rise, the moon set at the same time. I am not a fairy tale. Well, not yet. So I've read that poem many times, and the words, the wide road in front of me, really stick out to me because all evidence points that Emery lived his life just like that. He welcomed everyone into his life. He welcomed all opportunities. He just lived life. One thing I'd like to just end with is just to ask you, gosh, you juniors and seniors, and just to ask you as you go forward in life, be mindful. Be mindful of your choices because your choices matter and your choices can impact others. Be mindful of whose car you get into. If you believe someone is impaired and they're out there on the road, call 911. Be the change that must occur. Help me to prevent another family from going through what we have. Help me to share Emery's story. Thank you.
Talk to you a little bit about my story and share some statistics as well to let you know. I actually used to teach at Westfield High School, so I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for wearing green and shamrocks today to support me for Westfield. Right? No, boo. Okay, that's fair. Boo. Okay. You probably beat us in most of the sports anyway, so it's fine. So the pictures that you see up front are actually of my sister, Lisa. She's my only sister. She was 26 years old in those photos, and something really exciting happened on this trip. My sister got engaged. I was very lucky to be on that trip with her, and it was our first kind of adult trip going out together with our boyfriends at the time, and you can see Jesse there. They got engaged, and I was able to witness that and take some really terrible photos because it was a very fancy camera and it was a lot of pressure. But about 11 days after this, actually, my sister Lisa was killed by a drunken driver. I wasn't sure if I was going to share with you today, just because I really do want to keep the focus on Emery. The fact that he's from here, watch these halls where you are, it's very tangible. The reason I'm sharing a little bit about this with you is because the person who killed my sister was 19 years old. And some of you are going to be that potentially in just a few months, within the next year even. And so, of course, we know the legal limit is 21 years old in this state to be able to drink. And I know not everybody chooses to follow that. There is a lot of research, a ton of research that backs up the reasoning as to why it's 21 years old. I know you're not supposed to have your phone, so don't Google right now, but you can kind of look into some of that research sometime if you don't believe me. There's a lot of research just because it backs how your brains are actually developing, which no teenager wants to hear their brain's not fully developed yet, but it's not. That's science, okay? Late 20s. And that's why it's best to avoid and not impair yourself at all, and that's why the drinking limit has not dropped and it's still 21. So this picture right here is actually the intersection where my sister was killed. She was a nurse at Community Hospital East, and this was about 2 blocks over. You see the trees on that far left side, that's where her subdivision is. And so she was only a few blocks from home, which is the statistic. Within 2 miles of home is where so many fatalities actually happen. My sister was driving kind of just up through the middle there, taking a left turn. She did have a green arrow. And the offender who hit her actually hit the passenger side T-bone. What's important about this crash, what's very significant, and the reason my sister is not here today, was the speed. It's a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, and he was going 72. So that factors into a lot of that type of impact that can come from that. The person who killed her was at .02. Anybody have an idea of what the legal limit, if you're over 21, is that's considered impaired? Go ahead, just shout it out. .08, right? So we hear .08 is what is actually across the country. Some states have lowered it to .05. But .02 is how much alcohol he had in his system when they were able to administer a blood test after the crash. And he also had some marijuana in his system, active amounts of marijuana. Both of these things happened a few hours before the actual crash took place. They can time that out based on how the body metabolizes it. And the reason I share that with you is this. .02 for a lot of people doesn't seem like much. .08 is what we would call the legal limit. But .02 we know is actually where a lot of impairment begins. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to this chart right here. This chart there's two, and they're both very significant. On the left side, you see VAC level, that's the alcohol content level in the blood, and how many hours until you're back to 0. Okay, so how the body metabolizes it. This is rooted in science. Your body acts the same because of how the alcohol affects blood. So we can see how long it truly takes to get back to that 0, having 0 impairment when you're driving the vehicle that anyone on the road can suffer consequences from a vehicle. And so that's just an important thing for you to realize how many hours it can really take for the alcohol to truly leave your system. I would argue more of an important visual for you is on the right side, and that might be very tough for you in the back to see, so I'm going to point some things out to you. This actually talks about how blood alcohol content impairs your body. So I told you the person who killed my sister was at .02 right here at the top. That talks a little bit about the effects of typical loss of judgment, some loss of judgment. So that right there, I can tell you, is this. That is somebody who maybe falls into some peer pressure. They go to a party, they drive there, and they fall into some peer pressure. They drink a little bit, and all of a sudden your judgment is now impaired. That's what alcohol does, it impairs your judgment. So now you're thinking, well, if I wait a little bit, maybe I can drive home. Maybe I can make those decisions. You really can't, because your body is actually, your brain is impaired at that point. That seemingly low blood alcohol content is still impaired. Some states have dropped down to the legal limit being .05. That's where we see exaggerated behavior, some loss of small muscle control. I'm not sure, I assume almost everybody in here, if you don't have your license, you're close to getting your license. Muscle control is incredibly important when you're driving a large vehicle, any vehicle. It's important when you're riding a bicycle, okay? And so the fact that you're losing some of that coordination because of impairment, that's huge. That's what causes these crashes, and that's why we say they're 100% preventable. Because all we're really asking is to have everybody make the decision to not get behind the wheel with these types of impairments. .08, that's what our federal legal limit is. That's where muscle coordination becomes poor, your balance, vision, your reaction time, concentration, short-term memory loss. Short-term memory loss, that's actually one of the reasons that it's recommended to not drink under 21, because it does actually affect your processing ability long-term if you're drinking underage. So obviously as we keep going, .10, .15, we even see most of the time when you are seeing and hearing about these crashes, you're seeing those, what we would think of like a crazy limit, .22, .25. Those are where we're typically going on the side of hospitalization, alcohol poisoning, things like that. Although that can even happen at a lower blood alcohol level too. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because this is all backed in science, this is factual and it's irrefutable. And that's important because that should speak to you. That should tell you that impairment is out of your control when it comes to alcohol and other substances. You can't help it. It's meant to affect your body, therefore it'll affect everybody else on the road that you might be involved with. So, something I wanted to share with you. Has anybody ever Googled themselves? Don't be shy. I have. I just talked about how terrible I did in tennis most of the time in high school, and it was really awful to read all the time. The reason I put the screenshot up here is because this is what happens when you Google my sister's name, Lisa Street. I know it looks like Street, it's very confusing. This is what happens now. It doesn't talk about her accolades through high school, the records that she broke across country. It doesn't talk about her nursing degree and how much joy she spread in the community, choosing a career in acts of service. It talks about her death, okay? That's not how I would want my sister to be remembered. That's why I'm here today. That's why somehow I managed to quit a job in teaching and make less money, guys, okay? And so I want to spread this. This is also important because look at the offender at the bottom. Their picture comes up. Regardless of how somebody reacts to a situation like this, if they're accepting of the fact that they caused a death, they changed my life forever, my children will never meet their aunt because of this. The ripple effects of the waves of grief that hit my life to this day, which happened 7 years ago, to this day, it still affects me daily how much I miss my sister, my only sibling. And how this person reacts to that, whether they think it's their fault, whether they take ownership, you can't control that. That's completely out of my control. But what the internet controls is how everybody else sees you. And that matters, because this person every single day for the rest of his life has to wake up knowing he made a choice to take someone else's life, to steal joy from this world and impact everybody from there. The ripple effects from these choices matter greatly. So a little bit of statistics that we have for you. Every 79 seconds, someone is killed or injured in a drunk driving crash. About 31 teeters between 30 to 33% when we look at statistics. About 31% of all traffic crash fatalities in the United States involve drunk drivers. And that means just above 0.08, because that's what's considered the legal limit right now. I would love for that to change. I don't think you should have any impairment at all, especially since we know there's impairment at 0.02. It's probably not going to change. So that means there's also all these other crashes that you were seemingly less impaired. 0.02, the person who decided to run a red light 30 miles per hour faster killing my sister was lower than this, okay? So statistics are important because they tell us the facts. Every type of crash they have. Think of all the other types of impairment you have. Cell phones, someone's messing around in your back seat, and all of a sudden you're distracted, ice on the road, all of the types of things that cause crashes. Over 30% is because people chose to get behind the wheel impaired. In 2021, 401,000 people were killed or injured in a drunk driving crash, and 2 out of 3 people will be impacted by drunk driving in their lifetime. So I hesitate to do this, but if you feel like it, raise your hand if you know somebody or somehow you've been impacted by a drunk or drugged driver in your lifetime, okay? Okay, and I've personally been impacted twice. My car was totaled by a drunk driver, my first car that I bought when I was a teacher, and then obviously that pales in comparison to the loss of my sister a few years later. And so this statistic is important to notice the lifetime thing. So if you haven't been impacted, chances are you're going to be. And that's because of choices. And how we stop this is a generational stop. We stop allowing it, okay? We say it's not, you cannot get behind the wheel impaired. And what that honestly takes is positive peer pressure a lot of times. So just keep that in mind. You're at an age right now where you're going to be coming into situations where you're probably going to be tempted. And there's a few things I'll end this presentation with, just ways to kind of help you out with that. One more thing I wanted to highlight. I'm not sure who might be going into law or law enforcement or anything like that, but this is a slide that I find particularly important to share. Has anyone ever heard of black box system or black box information? Some people have, okay. So what that is, in cars, planes, they have this information that basically tracks all the data of what's happening with your car. You can reconstruct their professionals that will try to see what happened in a crash. Did they run the red light? Was it red? Was it green? You know, witness testimony is not always great, but something that's very factual is the black box information. So I know it's probably blurry in the back. I'll try to point this out for you. This right here is this chart. This is also why math is important, my friends, because you can read charts, just in case you hate math. This is a timestamp until impact. So 5 seconds before impact, 0 seconds at impact, okay? We have vehicle speed right here. This is the vehicle speed, 61. I know that they must have either turned, that they were at a light before this, so that means they're accelerating. 61, all the way we get up here to 70, 71. This is 1 second before impact, 0.5 seconds, at impact, 68. So they were accelerating. I would say personally, right around here, this 3 to 5 second time is where they saw the light was yellow, okay? That's when they made the conscious decision that no matter what's in their way, they're gonna run this light. That decision killed my sister. And they made that because most likely they were impaired. Not only did he have the marijuana and the alcohol in his system, he had 2 passengers. And those passengers can also cause impairment. For however they were acting, whatever decisions they were making, they knew that that was going to happen. The reason I say this timestamp is because if we look over here, the accelerator position, 35, 49, decent acceleration. Right here, 100% acceleration. Pedal all the way down. That's when the decision was made. The decision was made to kill my sister. Is that what he wanted to happen? I really doubt it. I don't think he wanted to go to jail. I don't think he wanted to live forever knowing that he took someone away from us. But that's the decision that he made. All the way down to here, he did not push, or let off, I should say, he did not let off of the accelerator until 0.5 seconds before impact. So whether you weren't paying attention, whether you thought that she'd make it through the intersection, you didn't time it, I'll never know those things. I will never have an answer to that because the person who killed her still thinks it's not even his fault. There was actually an officer at the intersection and their squad car caught everything on camera. And that was very significant to us because instead of allowing somebody else to blame my sister, we were able to actually see that her light was green. And when you see a car approaching in a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit zone, you assume they're going to be stopping at the stoplight. Instead, he changed lanes behind a stopped car and ran the light. A couple things I want to share with you that I think are significant, and then I'll be done because I know you've done a really great job sitting, and I know it's really awful. So, safe driving practices. Seems pretty basic, right? Always wear your seatbelt. No matter where you sit in the car, your seatbelt is it's actually lowest used among teens. That's even in parking lots and things. You just don't forget it, or you forget it. You think you're only going a couple miles. Use your seatbelt. That's huge. I work with a lot of victims, and it's very challenging to know that they were told if their loved one had a seatbelt on, they'd probably still be here. My sister was wearing a seatbelt, but there are a lot of people who don't, and there's a lot of consequences with that. Eyes on the road, hands on the wheel, no electronic devices. Okay, that's another form of impairment. I'm here to talk to you about substance impairment, but obviously being distracted is another form of impairment. Not doing, your makeup, messing with the radio, keep your focus on what you're doing. And another reason to do that? You might not be impaired, someone else could be. So the more you are able to focus on what you're doing when you're driving, the better reaction time you're going to have to get yourself out of a potentially dangerous situation. So limit the number of passengers. The risk of fatal crash goes up. Direct relation to how many teenagers are in your car and how distracting. If you're a passenger, be a good one. Be respectful that somebody is driving a vehicle. It's your responsibility when your friend is driving to not distract them, not show them pictures and show them things while they're driving, let them focus. Follow the speed limit. Like I told you earlier, my sister would probably be here, maybe a broken arm, some other things, maybe some injuries, if they were just going the speed limit instead of speeding. Anybody in here taking physics? Physics, you're gonna have to, maybe taking some physics. Okay, so you're learning the miles per hour thing, right? Let me tell you right now, go do the math on how much speeding 5, 10, 15 over the speed limit actually saves you in time. It's not much. If you're late, you're gonna be late whether you're speeding or not, so you might as well just follow the speed limit because it's there for a reason. So think of those calculations, I guess, and that might help you out to not also get a speeding ticket in the meantime. Take a stand. Make the choice to never consume alcohol or other drugs under the age of 21. That's what I'm asking of you today. I know there's a lot of temptation. I know that those things are out there, but I'm asking you not to, mostly because I care about your brain. Why do I care about your brain, each and every one of you? Because I'm actually quite selfish. And I want a very safe community for my 4 and 2-year-old girls to grow up in. And I want you to take care of me when I'm like way old. I know I'm not kind of old compared to you right now, but like when I'm way old, I want you to be really awesome so I have a great community. So please take care of your brains, take care of your bodies in that way. Make a pact with your friends that you're not going to use substances. That's a positive peer pressure. That's helping all of you stay together and make those wise choices to not be impaired. Have a plan for when you're in a situation and there's alcohol or other drugs. Look out for your friends and peers, especially if you think they're using substances. This is incredibly important. Never, ever, ever get into the car with somebody who has been impaired. You might make the smart choice to not be impaired under 21. Somebody else is going to tell you, I do it all the time, I'm used to it, we're only going 2 miles, blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. However much you think somebody might be mad at you for calling them to get you out in a safe way to another situation, or calling a Lyft or an Uber or whatever you can, do that, because we want you here. We don't want you to be hurt, and I certainly don't want you to even be part of being put into a position of hurting somebody else. So do not get in the car with somebody who's impaired, and just practice safe driving. So I think that we only have about 2 minutes left, so I do just want to say thank you so much. You didn't have a choice, really, but thank you for being here.
Thank you for being a very respectful audience. And at this time, we're going to go back to C, heading on to your D period. Have a great rest of your day.